Yes. Oh. As far as the oh, no. Oh, I have no idea. Man has these things. If it's making you happy.
Yeah. Like really. It's fine.
Morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Thanks for your patience. So good morning to members of the MAG 911 Study Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you'd like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We'll now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. MAG, staff, please.
All right, thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Dale Nanagay.
Present.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Here.
Thank you. David Raymer.
Present, at least online.
Thanks, David. Co-Chair Phelps.
Here.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Here, online.
Thank you. Co-Chair Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Travis Cutright.
Here.
Thank you. Brittany Brunet. Scott Walker.
Present.
Thank you, Scott. Jesse Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Catherine Masters. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any requests to speak from the public?
We have no request to speak.
All right, thank you. All right, so the next item is approval of the March 2023 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have questions or comments on the minutes? Prior to approval of this item, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment? Apparently not, assuming. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion by Co-Chair Phelps and a second by Dan Cotterman. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. And staff, will you conduct a roll call for members participating virtually, please?
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. David Raymer.
A yay.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Walker.
Aye.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you, everyone. Now we'll move to item number 4, 911 consultant project status update. So we'll ask Audrey Skidmore if she'll give us an update.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I just wanted to provide a quick update on the status of the project. The consultant interviews are pretty much complete. They managed to complete 58 interviews over the course of that section of the project. The advisory team signed off on a list of 5 peer agencies for the second task. So they have begun that process and the technology review. They've met with ADOA and they're continuing work on that. The initial collection of data from MR911 on the PSAPs was completed, and the PSAPs themselves have almost all turned in their additional information. So we are almost complete with that part of the data collection as well. The current project schedule with the collapse timeline shows that we should see the report on the first 2 sections May 12th, and the final recommendations would be available on June 9th. And we would, of course, take those draft products through the advisory committees at the advisory group. Sorry. So that is the current status of the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Audrey? Okay, thanks, Audrey. All right, we're going to go to item number 5. And Lisa, why don't you just I think it just makes more sense to have everybody come up. Is that okay? And just Lisa, and then will these mics work here? So Lisa, I guess you probably have to have someone to run the show, or whatever, but why don't we invite all of you just to come have a seat up here with us? So we don't want this to get too formal. And then, yeah, wherever you feel comfortable.
I'm sorry, is this on?
Yep.
Great, terrific.
Okay. Great.
Someone will probably grab my purse or I'll, just get it later.
Somebody will get it later, I'm sure. So Lisa, introduce yourself and then maybe let's have an introduction for everybody that's here. So thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. My name is Lisa Meyerson Marshall. I am the Chief of Enterprise Programs and Consulting for ADOA Asset, responsible for statewide initiatives. And I have other members of our team here today, so I'll have them introduce themselves. Chantel, should we sort of show the list of names? Would that be possible? Yeah, that would be terrific. Great. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm J.R. Sloan. I'm the state CIO.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jimmy Arwood, and I serve as the legislative liaison for the Department of Administration.
Travis Jensen, and I manage the 911 program with ADOA.
So we have some others that are listening in on the phone. Our whole team is not here today, but we came on short notice. We're thrilled to be here, and we have a short presentation if you'd like us to go through it. If you prefer that we just start with a bunch of Q&A, we can do that. This is the presentation we already shared with the chairs. So you had expressed interest in having us come here to present it to the committee. So we're prepared to do that, but we're also here and available to answer questions as well.
So this great question, Lisa. I don't know. I want you to be able to, I think we should have some of the presentation.
Okay.
But maybe based on kind of the conversation we had, if there's, I don't know if you have to go through every slide, but maybe this.
Yeah, we're very
summary
flexible.
Highlights, and then maybe we could ask questions, and then maybe that'll take us back to the presentation. So you kind of know where we left the conversation and what issues kind of rose to the top. So maybe if you want to use the presentation to address some of those issues, or what's your thought?
My thought is let's bring up the presentation, start. We can speed up, slow down, skip,
Okay.
move on. We're pretty nimble. So I'm going to
Okay.
have Travis run the presentation. So I'm going to switch places with him.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Okay. All right, Travis, let's see how we can get through this, but
good morning,
also
everybody.
make sure we keep it open for conversation and discussion.
Yes,
So go ahead.
There is a lot of content in here. I'm going to try to keep it high level. Please stop me if there's any questions or comments that you'd like to make, and we'll just kind of keep it the flow normal. So thank you. So first and foremost, we just kind of wanted to give a little bit of what our role is at the State 911 office, what it is that we do to give that foundational understanding of where we're coming from. So first and foremost, we oversee the Arizona 911 excise tax. What that is that's a 20-cent fee that is put onto every single telecommunications device in the state. So if you ever look at your cell phone, there's a 20-cent 911 fee on there. All those monies roll up from every citizen in the state of Arizona to our office, and that's us about a $19 million annual budget. We take those monies, we distribute them back throughout the 81 PSAPs in Arizona to utilize for network architecture, infrastructure, as well as equipment that's in each of the PSAPs in Arizona. Oversight of the 81 PSAPs, we have PSAPs that represent 15 counties, the Department of Defense, multiple tribal nations. 24 of those 81 PSAPs are located within Maricopa County. We are currently executing the migration of our project titled Next Generation 911. This is just a update to the entire 911 system. If you can think back in like the 60s and 70s, the 911 network was put in. There hasn't been a lot of evolution in that time frame, but obviously technology has evolved quite a bit. High level, it is moving analog and digital into an IP-based environment. And then we also have oversight of GIS. So GIS is the foundation of NG911, that's Geospatial Information Systems. This is pretty much your mapping. This is what allows us to find citizens when they call 911 in a timely and effective manner. And then we also host a data analytics platform to monitor compliance with accordance with NENA standards. NENA is the National Emergency Number Association. That is a national association that the majority of 911 personnel try to drive towards their standards. We can go to the next slide. I'm gonna skip this, but this is a very, very detailed document that just kind of, we look at the top there, governance, financing, the 911 systems, PSAP support, and then GIS. So That's kind of what we do at the most fundamental level. Go ahead. Okay, just to give a little bit of background on our office and its current iteration. So previously, the office was housed under a state group called Grants and Federal Resources, and you can think of it primarily that it was a funding mechanism for all of the PSAPs. Money came in from Department of Revenue, went out through GFR out to the agencies. You could see how that would probably create a significant number of issues because there was no PSAP-based knowledge that was held within that group. They didn't have any technical understanding. They didn't have anything pretty much other than a financial responsibility to send the monies out to the PSAP. When we talk about the next generation 911 implementation, legacy and enhanced 911, that's the previous iterations of 911 that have come through. Currently, we're in an enhanced 911 state, moving towards that next generation 911 state. Didn't want to get too hung up on that portion. And some of the questions that I've heard that have come up throughout the study committee is kind of, there was a study committee in 2016. We're readdressing the study committee now. And I want to just give some background because the significant amount has changed. It's not the exact same study committee that took place before. So in the study committee from 2016, the companies that were brought forward to provide 911 service were what we call the incumbent, and that's pretty much whoever has infrastructure in the state of Arizona. And the only two companies primarily that have infrastructure in the state of Arizona is Frontier in Northern Arizona, and then Lumen, which was previously known as CenturyLink, throughout the rest of the state. So one of the things that Next Generation 911 allows us to do is to bring in a multitude of vendors through a competitive solicitation to provide service to the citizens of Arizona. So we're no longer kind of held to having to deal with those individual agencies who have that infrastructure. We can bring in anybody else. And so the company that is providing our overarching network is a company called Comtech. This was done through a competitive bid through our state procurement office, and they were awarded the contract over, I believe, 10 or 11 other vendors. And then the second part of 911 is the actual equipment that's housed at the individual facilities. So that is a multi-vendor award. There are 11 vendors on state contract. So I know we've spoken about AT&T a lot and their role in this implementation. It's not just AT&T. There's other vendors that can be selected. There's other vendors that are being utilized throughout the state of Arizona right now. They were just awarded the kind of highest score throughout that competitive solicitation. And then we talked a little bit about next generation kind of now and what it is. Go ahead. So this is a very, very high level overview document of what the previous iteration looked like. So if you just imagine each one of these threads in purple, yellow, and black being a route a 911 call can traverse, you can see how there are links in the thread that if they were to be broken, it would not allow for a 911 call to reach its intended destination. So that is one of the concerns, was just that lack of redundancy and diversity in how we get a 911 call from citizen to PSAP in the state of Arizona. This was the old or legacy enhanced network. In the next generation 911 environment, you can see that we've added in a multitude of threads to each one of these components. So very high level, citizen calls 911. It goes through what we call an originating service provider. You can think of this as like your Verizon, your AT&T, your T-Mobile. Those companies then have the responsibility to get them onto our 911 network, which is provided by Comtech. Redundancy located throughout. They have 2 data centers. One is housed in downtown Phoenix and one is housed in Dallas. Multiple threads to get out to the call handling equipment provider, which can be AT&T or Solacom or any other of the vendors that are on state contract. And then they have multiple paths to go out to each one of the PSAPs in Arizona. Every single PSAP in Arizona will have 3 connections out to it. Some will have 4 if they're a larger PSAP that consists of over 10 consoles within the agency. So it's making the entire network significantly more robust than it was or has ever been in the past. You can go ahead. Contractually, what has changed? So in the legacy and enhanced environment, the 81 PSAPs, 24 of which were under the MR91 consortium, had direct contractual relationships with either Lumen or Frontier. When we got into the details of what those contracts looked like, we pretty much found 58 different contracts with different vernacular and different contractual language. So you can see how that would be incredibly challenging for the PSAPs, especially in the more rural areas, in terms of how are they going to manage that network and that contractual relationship with both Lumen and Frontier. And once again, it was non-competitive. So this is back in 2016 in the study committee. It was just who was available, who had infrastructure in the state of Arizona. With Next Generation 911, with the state's contract, we've now kind of inserted ourselves into that contract owner, so to speak. This was done through a competitive solicitation, and now we're able to support the 81 PSAPs, 24 of which were in MR 911, throughout this process of being the contract vehicle. And then each individual PSAP can be a co-op on that contract.
So I just want to check in, is this going too fast, too slow, or are we keeping it?
Going. Are there any questions right now? Can you just help me clarify one thing though? So it's be previously 2016, whatever after that. So the relationship, there was kind of like the established network was existing, and it was kind of like you didn't really have a lot of choices. What you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Today, moving forward, there's more network options, but I'm trying to distinguish between the network and then like the equipment that interfaces with the network that gives us that next generation. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, so I would say there's more options because there's more vehicles for the call to traverse. So if you fiber, for example, I know Mesa just did a very large fiber implementation or contract that you're going into, right? So that fiber didn't exist in rural Arizona and even some of the more urban areas. So that infrastructure was built, and because we're moving to that IP-based environment, our calls can traverse that fiber. It can traverse broadband. It can traverse copper lines, microwave. There's unlimited options. LTE through your cell phones.
Sure. So Travis, so when we talk about I'm trying to now help me connect the funding that comes in through the cell phone, the charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that, like 18 million a year or something, or less than
That's
20,
correct, yeah.
whatever. So today, most of that funding goes towards what part of this system? Is it paying the network services, or is it paying for the equipment or personnel, or is that, or am I missing something in what that's funding?
Understood. So I believe we're getting ready to do a financial review with everybody, not today, but a follow-up meeting from today, and I think it'll be more clear.
Okay, fair enough.
Very high level, I can just give you a breakdown. Probably 50% goes towards the overarching network, and then 50% to the individual equipment that's housed at for the PSAPs services.
All right. Thank you. That helps.
JR just pointed something out to me. I think it's important to say that these are very simplified diagrams.
Sure.
These current systems do have much more redundancy and resiliency than is illustrated here. So we don't want to give a misimpression. We created sort of like a high level.
Sure.
Trying to just show the major players, not trying to show every bit of wonderfulness that is.
Right. Well, and I think I know we had just touched on this before, but I think that's going to be one of the questions from a statewide perspective is how do we, meet all those requirements of, redundancy, reliability, the financial support to be able to do all that, and so kind of like, I always use that kind of all in, if we're all in to the system, then how do we get comfortable that we have the redundancy, the reliability, and what are the resources to support that to allow us the entire state, right? The 81 PSAPs to all go to that in that same direction. Is this relationship, is the system ready to take all that on? How long would that take? We kind of touched on that a little bit, but at some point maybe we'll have that conversation too. And can we sustain that over a period of time? We have the limitation on the funding, right? So that puts pressure on all of us, but then how do you prioritize that across the entire state and still meet all these needs? So just something.
If I could jump in, Travis, you mentioned, I believe it was last week that there are cost savings switching to this network, correct?
Correct. So we can identify, I have a slide where we identify.
All I want to know is, maybe the cost saving, I just want to know, is there enough resources coming into the state today to allow for a complete entire statewide conversion, or everybody on regardless of all 81 PSAPs? And do we have a plan in place that provides us the highest level of reliability and redundancy? And where is that? And I kind of touched on.
Yeah,
last
the
time,
trade-offs.
Where's, well, not the trade-offs, but how do, when there is an issue, right? Where is that contact? Who do we, what does that look like, right? How does that relationship, a contractual relationship look like with a vendor who, instead of now calling MAG, who do I call, right? If my PSAP, if I have something that goes down. So just all of us. So just some point, I think those are just a few of the questions I might have. So
Okay.
thanks.
Try to address those in some of these slides.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Very high level. Here's our current status of where we're at with the project via the map. All of the counties that are in green are currently converted over to next generation 911 and are active at this moment. We are 42% complete with our project, which is serving about 29% of the population of the state of Arizona. And then in terms of land mass, we're covering 55% of the state in those areas that have been migrated over. Currently, or earlier this month, we converted over the Valley Emergency Communication Center, which is a fire agency for Pima County in the Tucson metro region, and then the Pima County Sheriff's Office, who is also in the same region. We have also completed the Tucson Public Safety Communication Center. That is the second largest PSAP in the state of Arizona. For context, the City of Phoenix Police Department is the largest. They have about 102 consoles. Tucson has 68, and then the next closest is Mesa. That's at about 32. So it is one of the largest, not just in the state, but it's the very
So is Tucson, that must be combined police and fire?
They're live.
It's a combined public safety communication center where they do both.
So you
Yes, sir.
count as one, even though maybe police
Yeah,
and fire
it's-
together?
It's a unique setup, but it's all done collaboratively
One,
in the
okay.
agency. Yes, sir.
Fair enough. Okay.
I'll get through some of these next slides a little more quickly, but this was our first phase implementation. So this covered Navajo and Apache County, as well as the White Mountain Apache Tribal Police Department. We've covered Mojave and La Paz County as well. All of these agencies are migrated over. We then moved down to Yuma County and the 5 PSAPs down there, hitting up Gila County, Pinal County, and Santa Cruz County in southern Arizona. And then we are currently in our phase 3 migration where we're working in Pima County down to the south part of the state. Next, we will be moving over to Cochise County, Graham County, Greenlee County, and then we added in the Maricopa agencies into phase 3 as well. And then after phase 3 is complete, we will be moving to the northern portion of the state where we will convert over Yavapai, Coconino counties, as well as DPS, which has 2 PSAPs. One is in Phoenix, one is in Tucson. That covers the entire state of Arizona. And then we've added in Gilbert PD as the agency from Maricopa. So currently where we're out our migration and where we're going in the future. This will all be completed by October. Some additional technology that next generation 911 adds in. So via that analog and digital component of moving to the IP-based environment, one of the things we're able to do is just to push a significantly larger amount of data through our system. So where before it was just taking a voice phone call, we can now send additional technological details through the 911 network. Some of those examples are pictures, text, videos, and live streaming. So one of the things that we're putting into all the PSAPs is a component that allows for all of these systems to be live. So this is active and working in all the agencies that we identified in the previous slide. You can go to the next slide. There's also an opportunity for a text conversion platform. So if you've ever listened to a 911 call or been in your PSAP, you can imagine it's very high stress. A lot is going on. You might hear something incorrectly. Maybe they said it's east when it was really west. So what this does is it puts that transcription in the face of the dispatcher so that they can see what is being said, and then they can get more accurate information to send our police, fire, and EMS resources. We're also adding in additional tools on the next slide, allowing for the system to automatically call back a citizen if they abandon the call. We're adding in integrated mapping solutions that have additional detail to any other mapping tool that we've ever used. There's some disaster recovery scenarios where we are allowing, if a PSAP were to go down, they have a significantly larger number of resources utilizing their partnering agencies behind them. There's a portal for ticketing, tracking, making sure that if you do have an issue, that the PSAP has complete and total visibility into what the issue is, how the network operations centers are tracking it, and what the resolution is. Our office also has visibility to that platform to be able to assist any of the PSAPs that have a problem as well. Hot seating would be your dispatcher going to another PSAP and being able to take their phone calls at that agency. So back to that disaster recovery scenario, it allows for significantly more redundancy in case the PSAP needed to evacuate or they weren't able to operate effectively. And then remote call taking options would be a laptop where you're able to work in a backup center or potentially even at a remote location like your residence as an option as well. Looking at a couple of the differences in technology across the nation. So I'm part of a group that has each one of the 50 state managers that's represented, and we meet on a monthly basis. So across the nation, we are moving into a hosted or a cloud-based platform. So it's getting away from what we're considering an on-premise solution. So if you've ever been into your PSAPs, all of your equipment is housed at the facility in a server room, right? So a technician would potentially need to go out to that facility to be able to service it if there was ever an issue. What we're doing in our implementation is we're taking all that equipment, removing it from the PSAP and putting it in a remote data center off-site that is housed by technical support that's able to fix any issues that come up. It's supposed to be a significant redundancy in the need to go out to the facility. Unless you need a new mouse, keyboard, a new monitor, something like that, you wouldn't really need to go to the agency. Plus, it's a significantly lower cost. Instead of having 81 server rooms located throughout the state, we're now able to consolidate all of that technology and all that equipment, put it in a data center, and it's housed at one location that we can service instead. This allows all of our software to be in line with each other so that your partnering agencies are utilizing the exact same version of software at the same time. So if there is a problem, they can reach out to their peers who are on the exact same version of software. Just allows for that additional redundancy and that additional networking between your additional agencies. And I talked about the expense. It's just cheaper to move towards that environment, and that's a big deal.
Travis, with the cloud hosted concept, let's say 10 years from now, there's another networking group you want to go. Who owns that? How do you own that backup data? Who owns that? How do you, is it hosted by AT&T? Is it hosted by someone you choose? Or how do you own that at some point to be able to move it if you needed to some other
You said
cloud?
You said the data. Do you mean the data? Or
Well,
the equipment?
everything that's the software, and I'm assuming, is it also the calls, the recording of the calls, or is that being hosted I mean, it's both the software and the data that it creates, right? All
Yeah.
the records that it creates.
Yes, sir. So each individual PSAP has a logging recorder, which records all of the phone calls, and those are owned. Those calls are owned by your agency.
Okay.
So a citizen Mesa calls 911. That's yours. That doesn't belong to us. It doesn't belong to AT&T. That's your call.
Would that also be stored on the cloud, or would that be held locally?
Most logging recorder companies, which are separate from this, you
Yeah.
have the ability to store that data.
Okay, so it's separate than what?
Yes, sir,
Okay,
it's separate.
okay, that's a separate component. Okay.
And then there are components of this that are owned. The hardware software for the call handling equipment is owned by AT&T, housed at their data center offsite. So if there is an issue, if it breaks, if there's a problem, it's actually written into our contract that they service that at no cost. So if something goes down, we need to fix it. They just go in, they fix it. They don't send us a bill. The maintenance is included in the contract. We can go to the next slide. Okay, one of the strongest features of what we're doing running through the statewide implementation is we built out contracts with all of these vendors, right? So in these contracts, we have service level agreements with Comtech, with AT&T, with Solacom, where we talked about that accountability, right? Who do you call? The service level agreements are written into the contract. So we're able to contractually hold them accountable if they ever are in breach of contract. Additionally, there are technicians that are needed. Some of them are in Phoenix, some of them are in Tucson. We have some in the northern part of the state. The contract is at a price not to exceed, meaning we can flood the entire state of Arizona with technical support. Doesn't cost us a dime. So that's a very, very attractive component, because if we need additional resources, if we bring on additional PSAPs that we didn't fully intend, we just go back to the contract and say we need X number of additional technicians to be able to support the influx of support that we weren't necessarily needing when we went through this several years ago. And then in terms of who do you call, right? So both AT&T and Comtech have a 24/7, 365 network operations center. So if you have an issue, you can call that agency at any time. They can fix it remotely, or they can send the technicians out to be able to service that. All of the PSAPs have access to be able to call them. So instead of a MR911 or a MAG that you're calling, you would be calling that individual agency. And you still own a contract with these companies. So if you have a problem, they have contractual obligations. Now, if they are not giving you the level of service that you deem necessary, you now have the state backing you because we inserted ourselves into that contract, as well as the Arizona Corporation Commission, the Federal Communication Commission, which has an FCC 911 task force. So because these companies are commercial companies, they have to adhere to ACC and FCC regulations. So you now have a whole entire additional layer of authority that didn't previously exist for accountability back to whatever vendor you ultimately select to move forward with. And then the state procurement office and the state 911 office, who we track the vendor performance management through a number of reports that are required to be sent to our office on a monthly basis.
So Travis, are you paying a fee? The fee you pay today with AT&T, is it already set or does it? That's what I'm trying to understand. You're saying not to exceed. So are you, that makes an assumption that all 81 PSAPs are at NG 911 and they're all fully engaged, and that's already covered in the scope of the contract today.
So part of the contract was for MR911 to participate in this implementation or to not participate. And then all 81 PSAPs were identified at a price point. So the price not to exceed is if all 81 PSAPs went forward with their service. So I'm just going to random number here, $50 million.
Right. Well, you've made that assumption that there's an assumption in the contract. When you say not to exceed, that's not to exceed after the 81, if 81 join.
Well, it's not to exceed per. Is
Oh,
that
per?
correct, Travis? In other words, per PSAP, there's a price?
There's a price per individual PSAP if they were to want services from the agency. It's
So-
based off of your population and a couple
Oh,
of other
okay.
things.
But so I'm just trying to connect that piece with the available resources. So are there enough funding coming in through the cell phone charge to cover 81 PSAPs on the AT&T contract?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the statewide interoperability. So one of the components that came through the RFP was MR911 existing in some state, what that looks like. I think we're kind of working through with the study committee and how that ends up coming to fruition. But what was in the RFP was for a fully redundant and interoperable networks. So we have the MR911 data centers, one that's housed in Phoenix, one that's housed in Phoenix and in Mesa. And then we have our two data centers that are in Phoenix and in Dallas. So if both of those data centers were to go down, let's say both of MR911's data centers were to go down in both Mesa and Phoenix, our Comtech network would be able to pick up all of that traffic and be able to send it through our network out to the intended PSAP. And the PSAP would never know the difference. So they could have a catastrophic failure of the system and no one would ever know. Everything would continue operating as it existed and everything would be working. Concurrently, if the data centers for Comtech went down, the MR911 data centers would be able to pick up all of the state traffic and send it out to its intended destination. So that was originally what was.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, sir.
I was just going to say that was sort of a revelation to us on Friday. We had a meeting with these guys that the RFP presumed that there would be an MR911 and a state system. Is that correct?
There were two components of the RFP. It was the option for that to exist or for MR911 not to participate.
So we try, because let's clarify, this is, I think, an important point.
Okay.
I just, I need a glossary here. You're very good at this, but I'm
Sorry.
But we're covering a lot really fast. So
No,
this is-
but this is awesome. I'm not complaining. It's just my mind is spinning a little bit. When you say MR911 and did this in this scenario that we just talked about as a backup, but is that an assumption that MR911 exists as it is today, or MR911 that is now migrated to NG 911?
So I think we have a lot of options actually, and I think this will come out through the study committee in our conversation with federal engineering. I don't think it's a black and white option number one or option number two.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility into how this eventually looks moving forward. There are some technical components that we need from MR911 to be able to move forward. And if ultimately the group is uncomfortable with the solution that we have, we might be able to offer a couple of different components. So in my opinion, and what I understand of the contract, we do have a little bit of flexibility in how we want this to be.
Fair enough. So Travis, that's fine. I guess what I want to know from you though is if there is let's just make an assumption that everybody, all 81 are migrating to NG 911. You kind of had me going here with all this, the backup in these big data centers, right? That exist, that are hosting all of this software and being able to serve all these PSAPs. If that's in place, is there a need for a specific MR 911? Is there a need for that to even exist, or from some, and maybe I don't understand a technical reason, maybe there is I don't know what the word is, an MR 911, an urban 911, let's just use that word, and then a rural or the rest of the state 911. Is there some advantage of having those hosted differently, or is there some kind of belt and suspenders reason to do that, or something like that?
Yeah, please. I mean, I'll take a shot at that. So, I mean, I think there's been, again, as my understanding is growing through the conversations as well, but I'm hearing that, there's been a lot of good investment and good design that has gone into the MR 911 system and network today. I would go back and answer your question as, Travis indicated, I think there's options that could be pursued, but I would look at it as, I think there's a lot of the technology is already there in the MR 911 network. It's probably some evolutionary changes, not revolutionary changes, that would enable, and that would enable it to interoperate with the rest of the state network. And that's kind of the core, we talked about in our conversation. That's something I hold very, very dearly, is that I want to see the outcome of all our conversations in this solution to produce a fully interoperable statewide network. To get to your question of, okay, well, it is kind of, in my mind, it's sort of belt and suspenders, or maybe, two belts and two suspenders, because when we look at the way these things are designed, I think there are some similarities in design approaches. In that, in the MR 911 network today, there are multiple, and I know we got Benj in the room. There's not just redundant connections. I think you've got 3 connections into most locations, coming through diverse paths. Those kind of same design principles are also being employed and I know we mix the the terminology when we say next gen 911. It's not like these are like 2 networks. I think that if we move forward with the way the RFP was proposed, you'd end up with 2 fully next gen 911 networks operating side by side and backing each other up.
Okay.
And I think that what I'm hoping you get from your engagement with federal engineering is that they can help advise you on the value of the investments that are already there, how that can be part of an interoperable network, and then you can make decisions about what the cost is to have 2 redundant networks versus 1. And that's
sure. But that's a conversation we have to have together, right? Because if we decide to do, if an option to have 2 separate, not 2 different ones, I think that, from the state perspective, there's a finite amount of dollars coming in to support that. That's why I keep asking the question, right? So
right.
Having all that separation and to create that redundancy or whatever liability is important, we have to do it within a constrained amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And I think there's always within communities, right, this kind of looking over the shoulder of saying, well, wait a minute, they've got the next electric fire truck. We need to get an electric fire truck. They've got the latest, whatever Axon video. We need to get the next Axon video. And I don't think in an urban center, you should have pockets of different technology for responding to emergency services.
I agree with you.
Because if you're a community that thinks I can be separate because I can get high definition video and nobody else is going to get it, that really starts to break down our whole service response theory, right? Where we're backing each other up, right? And when there's something in an adjacent community, I don't go send them my old fire pumpers. I send them what's available. I send them the brand new. So we have to kind of work within that philosophy. And I guess we need the state to help us, right, maintain this idea that there's a really important idea of this. I don't know if parity is the right word, but this idea of this, we can't be have and have nots, especially when they're so intermixed in a fully integrated urban system. So we need your help not to allow the cherry pickers to take off and say, well, we're going to go because the state's offering us this delicious opportunity over here, and we're going to get ahead of everybody else. Because that begins to erode the whole philosophy of why we try to back each other up and support each other. Now, we as a whole group, we need to figure out, and you guys are providing incredible information about where should we all be going together. And I think that's the comment. Josh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and kind of building on your comments. I agree to a point that there needs to be sort of a set level of expectations and parity, if you will. But I also know that having worked now in this region, also in Southern Arizona, also in rural Arizona, the expectations are very different from our citizens, our residents, about what public safety and what emergency response looks like many times. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand is, in the RFP process and the contract that was awarded, what was the anticipated governance model, or where was the locus of control when it came to decision making in the following steps? So you kind of laid this out in phases, like we're going to go around the state and eventually convert everybody to NG 911, which is fair, but there's going to be a next generation 911. There's going to be other bells and whistles that we see and that our communities get approached with from vendors or other technologies out there. There's going to be decisions that are in many ways intensely local to an individual PSAP about what it is that we want responding to something that in our community we're being asked to do. How does that work if we're all part of this system? Is that all those decisions are made just by the state, or is there some sort of council of groups that make those decisions about how we advance, or how was that anticipated to work when this was all discussed?
Do you want to talk? Do you want me? So I'll just share that I think that the governance structure continues to need to evolve. You have a beautiful governance structure here, so you know what a good one looks like. I've managed and run and created governance structures for statewide programs in public safety before. They are hard to put together and hard to hold together, but extremely important. So we're hoping that this continued improved partnership is going to help us to do so. We do have a 911 advisory council. We do have the statewide contract. There are optional things that can be purchased under these contracts, so that for a particular organization, if they want something that they can afford to get, they're going to buy it. If we have statewide contracts, hopefully it's going to be at a good price, but I'm not going to tell them they can't buy the bell and whistle because their neighbor doesn't have it. That's not realistic. And, nobody would sit still for that. So it's a balancing act, but definitely we need to evolve the governance, and we're looking forward to having you help us with that.
That's a fair point, Lisa. I guess I'm thinking more in terms of the public dollars that are collected across the state, how those decisions are made. Maybe that's to Josh's point. I mean, every community can decide to put on a different coat of paint or more, ergonomically nice chairs for their PSAPs. But I think when the sensitivity comes when there's dollars being collected across the state, and we know that the dollars being spent are not relative to where they're being collected, I think there gives them sensitivity of like, how are those decisions
Urban versus rural, et cetera. Yeah, we've
so we
talked
have to
about
go through
this.
all that, right?
So in terms of, so now we're talking different, because I just want to make sure, and we wear this two-headed hydra a little bit, this two-headed hat. One part is the technology that we're trying to bring forward and make available for those who want it. And then the other part is the funding. And so of course that creates, they're different, but yet connected, very much so. So currently, I would like to see us have a conversation, and we started this dialogue, and I'd like us to continue, not necessarily today, on the revenue side. How do we increase the revenue picture so that there's a bigger pot for all of us to take advantage of? We were asked by Ed and his team to look into that. We have had some follow-up. I haven't had a chance to tell him. I tried to last week, but we got so much other stuff covered. We got into architecture, God help us. But we have had some preliminary conversations with the AG's office. We're talking Department of Revenue. We're starting those conversations. This was on our roadmap, but we put it up into the queue because I think we've gotten enough of the state done now, and we're getting it under our belt well enough that we can put some of our time and attention there. I do think that we're we're all hoping that we're just finishing this budget cycle pretty soon for the state, but we're already starting, Jimmy can tell you, planning for the next budget cycle. We need to talk about whether or not there's support within the larger community for an increase in this excise tax so that the pool of money is more realistic for what we all want to do and feel that we need to do, and where that support comes from, and whether that would be driven by the state or actually by the communities saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't care if you call it a tax. It's ridiculously low compared to everybody else nationally. We need this for public safety. And then we can get a coalition together to push, and I'm not sure who would push some sort of legislation along the line of that. I also feel, to your question about governance, that we need to look at our statutes. They're out of date. We have a statutory package. I would love to work with you and get feedback on that package before we get too far down the road in terms of advancing that. We all also looking at our rules and trying to get those buttoned up. They're woefully out of date, talk about stuff that none of us do anymore. So we have, we're working furiously for that. We have been also looking at grant funding. I'm hoping that we're going to have some news soon on some funding that might help us for the rurals, but then will help us because it increases the pie statewide using ARPA. Again, I'm hoping, I'm not promising, but I'm hoping. So we have been looking for other sources of funds as well. I would like to look also and get feedback on the structure for this advisory committee that we do have in place. It does have representation from all the counties, but is it the proper structure? Jared will tell you, I'm sort of love governance structure. So I'm excited to dig in on that and would love some input on that as well. So we have some good places to go with these things.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ed.
just from all this I've heard, I think there's a decision point on the MAG side of the table that's really not about the DOA, which is, should there be an MR 911, right? We've heard that it was set up where there could have been, it was contemplated there could either be an MR 911 plus the state or the whole state and no MR 911. And I think that's why you guys exist. That decision hasn't been made. However, MR 911 is turning into Swiss cheese with, I was going to say a donut, but it's not even a donut. It's Swiss cheese. And I think we're trying to you're trying to get the arms around before it gets into more Swiss cheese. There has to be a decision on that. Otherwise, we're just getting picked apart one by one, leaving. And so somehow on the MAG side, we have to get the member agencies to understand we have to make a decision together, whether we're going to stay as MR 911 in whatever fashion that is, and that's what the consultant's for, or we decide as MR 911, you know what, it is better to just all go a Utah model and the entire state operates through a state system. However we can do that, we want to be part of it. But that to me is an important place where we are, because I think all this is starting to make a lot more sense.
Absolutely.
But, and as you all said, we got to have a decision on our side of the tape before we get de facto go to a state model.
Yeah, and I think we want to make the right decision, not only for the region of our communities, but I appreciate kind of the feedback from the state saying, there may be a reason why there's some constituency still called MR 911 for some other reasons, but we've got to figure that out. It may be different than what we look like today, but maybe to help even ensure or support the statewide implementation, maybe there is a reason we do that. I don't know. So, but we've got to be clear about what that is, right? And so if you're inside the MAG geographic area, but you're not in it, well, does that make any difference? And so that's part of why there has to be a reason to be together. And to me, it's more than just looking at a 911 operations center. Because it's kind of like, okay, I want to be part of the family, except when it comes to the decisions about where I go on vacation. It's like, we've got to figure out how to make all this work together. So go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. So kind of two questions, maybe following up on Ed's comments. Will federal engineering in their report be kind of indicating to us the advantages of having these two side-by-side networks versus, because it sounds to me like in listening to how the general architecture is of the statewide system, you can get too much redundancy. I mean, to where you're not really receiving a lot of benefit. Sounds like the state system, if we all were onboarded onto a statewide kind of Utah, it still sounds like we have a fairly robust amount of resiliency and redundancy built into the system. So will federal engineering kind of, in your mind, highlight the advantages, disadvantages? Because there's going to be a cost component to maintaining additional redundancy.
Thank you, Chair, member of the committee. They are taking that into consideration. So they're coming forward with an evaluation recommendation based on the values that you've identified. So they'll certainly take that redundancy into consideration and balance that kind of against the other trade-offs in the system.
Great. Can I address that
I
question?
think we also have to be prepared that there's not going to be a right answer. Right? We see that, you see that in dealing with your city councils where the council members sometimes want, can you just have it put into a computer and spit out the right answer for me? But I think in this case, it's going to be about, Audrey said, it's going to be about the values of the region. How much redundancy, how much control is worth whatever that costs. And we just have to decide that together.
Can I address your question, sir? So one of the things that we did share with federal engineering was exactly the topic that you just discussed. So I would hope that that would come through in their ultimate assessment. We have 2 data centers. Why not 3? Why not 4? Why not 20? Right? Because eventually you're not getting your ROI back on the cost of what that looks like. Something else that we're working on that we shared with federal engineering is the point of next generation 911 is you'll hear a term network of networks. It's this interoperability on the national scale. So it's states working with their partnering states to add all of this different redundancy in these tools. We've already started those conversations with our partnering states. In Southern California, CenturyLink is their next generation 911 provider. I've met with their state 911 Lumen as well. In Utah, it's Motorola. In Colorado, it's Lumen. The Navajo Nation just opened an RFP. New Mexico just opened an RFP. Nevada's coming up into the folds of that. So we're looking at all of these additional backup systems that makes Arizona the most robust 911 network in the nation and at an effective cost point.
Great. Thank you. So then next kind of question, I think Josh kind of was talking about this a little bit about the maybe different PSAPs needing different technologies, but it's been my experience that what drives the technology approach is generally funding driven. And so I can't envision, for example, a PSAP in a rural area saying, well, we don't want this kind of technology if the price is the same. And so I want to make sure that the statewide, the way you've approached your agreements is that it's assumed within your pricing model that every PSAP would get the full level of feature set built into it. And there wouldn't be just anticipating only certain areas would want the video component or other elements of the system.
Yes, sir. That is built into all of our PSAPs and it is quoted in for all of the future PSAPs we haven't migrated right now.
And then my last question, then I want to just follow up. So it sounds like that within the state contract, that there is an understanding that the individual PSAPs will have a direct line of communication regarding, this, system maintenance, repair questions, whatever. So we don't necessarily have to run through the state unless it would be something that would affect the funding part of it. But essentially, whether we constitute an MR 911 or we just break it down to individual PSAPs, there is an expectation on the part of, let's say, AT&T that our technicians would have a direct line of communication regarding the system performance.
Correct. Everything you said is accurate. So it really empowers you as an agency, as the contract holder of the equipment, to be able to have that relationship and to be able to hold that vendor accountable. We're here as a support structure and mechanism in case you have an issue or a cost structure or want to add something on. And then all of the FCC, ACC, those groups are supporting you as well on the back end in case there is a large scale issue that needs to be addressed.
So I wanted to mention one thing. We also could look at an iterative approach. So the network part of the MR911 system exists now in 2 networks in Phoenix and Mesa, I believe, and a lot of investment has been made there. We were asked would we be receptive to the idea of leaving that in place for a time? And then looking at whether or not whether it's an extra pair of suspenders or whether it's the needed pair of suspenders in a year or two, as opposed to flashing over if the investment in the technology is already there. We were asked that question by federal engineering. We didn't give them an answer. We said, we want your perspective on that. But I thought it was an interesting perspective. We also haven't discussed the importance, and it was mentioned at one of the meetings, and I don't want to forget about it, which is, state versus local. Okay. There's politics there. There always has been. We could have the greatest team in the world and we can convince you that this team's going to be able to bring forward a state solution. You could feel great about it. I can't say what the state team's going to look like in 5 years. And you know that you have relationships. I'm not knocking the state. I work for them. I love them. But at the same time, I'm realistic about the fact that the locals need to feel like they have skin in the game and a fair say if the state is going to be running something, and then it's going to be run well for them. So there is also you already have, obviously, the MAG organization that runs a lot of things. And to the point that was made earlier, there may be some benefit in continuing the administrative aspects and or the oversight aspects or the regional aspects of advocating and managing what's happening relative to the state system regionally, even if you're not running the technology, or if only running part of the technology like the network, but not the call handling equipment, et cetera. In other words, all of these options are on the table to look at and think about, because it's not just an either or, that could be a blend of how these work. And I think that there's a lot to be said for the fact that you do have this entire structure that has proven very valuable in so many different areas and is not only working for the 911 call centers, but is also working, as you said, for emergency response, for disaster recovery, for been involved in a lot of those planning efforts. This region is extremely strong in that. And in addition to things that are not related to emergency management. So there's something to be built on there, and there potentially could be a role, administrative or regional or whatever, collaborative, et cetera, beyond maybe with some portions of technology, maybe with some portions of technology initially, and then evolving away from some of the technology if it proves to be, a redundancy that's no longer needed over time. We're interested in seeing a solution that can have multiple elements to it and not an either or. We're not thinking about either or.
Good, thank you. And I think the technology is a major concern that we all have to keep working on. But I also think really what kind of begins to show up also is how are decisions being made on the prioritization of budgeting, right? And how does that fall out? Because I think that has been the mystery that's been of most just as equal concern by us in the frustration of getting equipment and decisions being made. And so I think that is something we'd like to be part of the conversation on too, and maybe there's a lot of good reasons why decisions are being made or not made, but I think we need to do a better job on our side, but we would offer the opportunity to have that conversation with the state too, so that we can better understand how those decisions are made.
And I would like to say that I think that's valid concern and issue. I'm not at all, shocked by that or concerned about what you're saying. I think that's absolutely legitimate. I've seen this program evolve over time. I think that the statutes and rules have been kept up, and I'm not sure, that a lot of decisions weren't, let's say, not understood. I don't know how the administration was. I can't speak for the past so much, but I will say that it's our goal at this time to strengthen those statutes, strengthen those rules. The grant guidance that just came out, we did share it ahead of time, got some feedback, made some tweaks to it, et cetera. And we want to continue to strengthen our policies and procedures so that there is no question. You don't feel like it's arbitrary, because I don't believe in arbitrary decisions when it comes to government money. It's not okay with me. So philosophically, I don't think it's okay with this administration. So definitely, I think that's a point well taken.
I can have that as a takeaway to add that to our financial conversation when we have that, to show that transparency in terms of percentage of funding influx versus outgoing. So it'll hopefully make a lot more sense when we have that chance.
What do you think, Travis? Where are you? You have a few more slides?
I think we have one more, but I'm not, it's everything we just talked about. Where do we go? Where do we go from
Put
here?
this up first.
So
Okay, awesome.
So it's 11:06
Yeah.
and we can keep going and answer more questions.
let's
We
just-
can come back. We're
Now, listen,
on
this
very
has
much a
been
roll.
very productive, I would say. I agree. Is there, while we have individuals here, let me ask those who are online, is there anyone who has a question for the state representatives that are here today? Scott, Jesse, Santiago, David, any one of you have a question?
I have none. Thank you.
Okay, anyone around the table? Ed, we're all good over here on your side? Lisa, let me just say on behalf of the committee, thank you for your time. I know you've got many, many other things you could be doing right now, but this has been very productive. We appreciate, I would say, just in the last 6 weeks, the tremendous advancement we've made in the relationship with the state. So thank you, Travis. Thanks for the work you've put together, try to put this in language or presentation that we can all try to understand. I think there's a lot more to go, but I feel like there's been a lot that's been just talking and clarifying and seeing direction. I think at the end of the day, we all want the best thing for all our communities and for the state of Arizona. And if you'll just allow us to be, we heard the update on the consultants report, that kind of gives us, we all know how that works. We kind of need that to go back to our bosses to say, we vetted this through. But thank you for making yourselves available to answer those questions. So
It's our honor and pleasure. We're happy to come back and anytime and offline, please contact us. You should have, I don't know if you have all of our contact information, but Chantal does.
we
So
know people.
I'm sure she'll share it with you. That's right. You know where I live, so just don't worry.
Okay.
Thank you so very
Thank you
much.
very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We're just down the street if you need something.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. Good. All right. Committee members, we don't have any briefings on items 6 or 7. So really the are there any requests for future agenda items? If not, our next scheduled meeting, which will be getting pretty close to when the report will come out, is scheduled for May 15th. So if we have no further business, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.